Now it's time to work on the final dress. So the final dress, here is a sketch of what the final dress will be. So the final dress is going to be a scoop neck in the front with a little puff sleeve, bodice to the waist with a French dart or very close to a French dart and a full circle skirt. In the back, it's going to be a deep V the whole way to the waist with a small 7-inch zipper into that same circle skirt. So the first thing that we're going to do to create this is we're going to take our sloper that we created that fits a size 8, and we're going to trace it onto a piece of dotted paper. I'm tracing the existing sloper, remembering to get the notches. Up the side, across, to the neckline, and around. I'm going to mark my apex. I'm also going to mark the dart point and the apex. I'm going to make sure that those two marks are there. I'll draw in the dart leg to the apex, the whole way to the apex. And then the next step will be to cut the piece out. So I'm going to, with my scissor, very accurately cut around the lines that I just drew. When I finish cutting it out, I'm going to do step 3, which is to draw the new line. So to draw the new line for the sketch, I can see that I'm going to be transferring this dart, doing dart manipulation and moving it over. So the step that we do at this point is we draw the new line. So I'm going to prepare that dart to be ending about 1 inch from the side seam. So here I'm going to draw in a new line, and then I'm going to label the existing darts, and I'm going to label those A and B. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the old dart. Remember, this time it's going the whole way up to the apex. I'm going to cut this part out. The next step is to slash up the new line, leaving it hinged just at the very edge. And then finally, I'm going to shift A and B until they are touching each other. I'm going to slide that over until it's touching, and it should touch accurately if I have it hinged properly. And then I'm going to tape it down. And I will tape A and B so that they touch each other, and this will have opened up this new dart area. The other thing, I always want to make sure that I've noted the grain line on any piece that I'm working on, because I may need that, I will need that when I go to cut. So my grain line is here, and we know that this is the center front, and for the style that we're working on, we will be cutting it on the fold. So we want to make sure that we have that information on the pattern. The other thing that we need to do on the front is to adjust the neckline, because as you can see in the sketch, the neckline is lower and wider than the original sloper. So we're going to move it down, drop the front of the neckline 1 inch, and we're going to open it up on the side 1 1/2 inches. So I'm going to mark those 2 spots, and then I'm going to draw in a new line. Of course, I always want parallel or perpendicular to center front. I want to be straight for about the first 1/2 inch, and then I can curve the line. So I'm going to draw a nice new neckline like that. Then I can take this piece and I can cut that extra piece, the extra section of neckline, which we're no longer going to be using, and we're going to trim it off. Now we're going to move to the back. So we're going to do a similar process. We're going to first trace off our full back sloper, making sure once again we have all the darts, and don't forget on this back we have darts, a dart at the waist, and we also have a dart at the shoulder, on the shoulder. So we want to make sure we get all of those in there. We're going to mark out our points as well. We're not going to be doing any dart manipulation on the back because when you look at our sketch, the 2 darts that were there originally are still there. The other thing, we always want to mark in our grain line. So we will be marking a grain line parallel to the center back. And we know that this is the center back. And for the purpose of the dress that we're doing, it will not be cut on the fold because it will be in 2 separate pieces. Once again, I can draw in my darts, my dart legs. Keep those in, and we'll draw in the ones on the bottom as well. The next step will be to adjust the neckline. So that same amount that we took off of the front neckline, which at the shoulder line was 1 1/2 inches, we will have to be removing that as well. And on the back panel, we will be creating a low V that's going to come into the corner of the waist, the back and the waist. So we're going to draw that line in. The neckline, we have to put a little curve into it so that it appears on the body that it's straight. So usually about 1/4 of an inch in is all we're going to need, and we're going to turn this line into a slightly curved line. You can see I'm drawing it in red, and I'm moving my ruler to create that curve. So you can see there's a gentle bow there. That's going to give us the appearance of a very straight V when it goes around the body. The next step is to trim away all of that unneeded area. But you can see if I trim this away, my grain line, which appears right there, is going to disappear. So the grain line, of course, would be the same on any section of the piece. So I may move this grain line over a bit just so that when I go to work on my facing or I go to lay this on fabric, I'll be able to identify what the grain line area is. So you can see the grain, no matter if it's over here or over there, they're parallel to each other. The next step is to remove the part of the back neckline or back panel that we will no longer be using, because with the deep V, this section will not be the section that we'll be using. So we can open that out like that. We can also trim around the rest of our piece. The next thing that we'll need to do is create a front facing. That's going to be this area that's going to be the border of the front neckline. So what we do is take a square piece of paper or a rectangle, and we're going to create what will be that same center front line, will be our grain line, and we're going to lay this on top so that we will be able to create a 2-inch facing around it. We could either do that, laying it on top, or we can let the pattern lay on top of it. So basically what we're going to be doing is tracing out this area. So if you want to do it this direction, that works. So if I want to trace something like that out, I can lay my ruler here so I still have a straight edge to follow on any area that I can. And here I'm going to follow the neckline. And so then what I need to do is create a 2-inch, we're going to be creating a 2-inch face. So you can see I just do a dashed line that goes around to that, and then I will be connecting that. Once again, this is going to be my grain line. This is the center front of the facing, and this is the front facing. So I'm going to label it, and then I'm going to trim it out. Next, we'll go to creating the back facing. So with our back panel, with the trimmed out back neckline, we're going to lay this on top of a piece of paper, and we're going to trace out this line as I've done. Not only that line, I'm also going to trace the bottom of the waist and the shoulder. But here I'm going to do the shoulder line straight along this area and just continue it straight, disregarding that dart. So once I've done that, then I'm going to, with 2 inches, I'm going to make that same 2-inch facing. Remember, grain line, I want to transfer the grain line so it is going the same direction. So we want to know that when we cut this back facing that it is on grain. The next step will be to replacing the dart intake for this new dart that we created. So the first thing I'm going to do is tape down a patch, a rectangle piece of paper, into the area where the new dart intake will be. So I'm going to patch that and secure that down. The next thing I need to do is I need to fold it on the inside leg. Sometimes it's easier if you do that from the opposite side. So flip over the piece of paper and then we're going to fold it. Then we're going to take that and we're going to bring it over to the point where it touches the balance of the waist area. And I can fold this up, not worrying too much if it folds completely flat. Then I'm going to take my wheel and I'm going to go across that new area the whole way to this section. When I open it up, I can see my dotted line and it's inverse from what we're used to doing or the way that we usually see it, but it's accurate because of the location of this particular dart. So that will be the new dart line. I'm going to put my notches out. Those are the notches. And then finally I need to lower the tip of the dart because remember we were working up to the apex. So the original dart area that we would have had on our pattern was 1/2 inch down from the apex, which would be right here. But I don't want to be that far up. I want to have my dart sewn further down than that, at least another 1/2 inch. So therefore I'm going to move that dot down 1 whole inch and circle it. This will be the area where we will sew. We'll mark it there with our awl and then we'll sew past that. The next step will be to take all of the pieces that we've created, the front bodice, back bodice, front facing and back facing, and tape them onto a new piece of paper. Then we will begin to add seam allowance. So the first piece that I'm going to add seam allowance on will be the front. So in the front, the center front, we will be cutting on the fold, so there will be no seam allowance added there. But everywhere else, except for the neckline, we'll be adding a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we're going to want to follow the line, follow the pieces that we have, and create that 1/2 inch seam allowance. There I am. And then any of the notches we're going to bring out onto that seam allowance. So I'm adding the 1/2 inch seam allowance the whole way around. I will be adding the 1/2 inch here on the armhole. And sometimes on the armhole it's easier to do it as a dashed line. So I'm going to go around, add my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then across the shoulder. And of course this is going to come up and match to that, and we're going to need to connect the dots. And then on the neckline is 1/4 inch. So we're going to just, again, if you'd like to do it with dashes, I find it's easier when we have these curves, and we're going to add that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so 1/4 inch at the neckline, 1/2 inch everywhere else, and nothing here at the shoulders, at the center front. On the back, we're going to add a 1/4 inch here on the neckline. That's our neckline area. We're going to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, everywhere else, 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, and 1/2. And then on the front facing, at our neckline area, which is this portion, it will be 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, and nothing, 0 here on the center front. On the back, we're going to do 1/2 inch. Again, this is the 1/4 inch area. This is the neckline. You see I've marked it as neckline. This is the waist, and this is the shoulder seam, just to keep myself so I know which part is what. 1/2 inch there and 1/2 inch here. So once I've labeled out where my seam allowance is going to go, I'm going to add it on to the pattern. And these are now patterns that will be ready to cut. So then I will trim them out and I will have that ready for when I'm ready to go onto fabric. When all the seam allowance has been marked on at the 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch dimensions, you can then take this piece and cut it out of the paper, and it'll be ready for cutting on fabric.